Imagine buying a truck or SUV, dropping tens of thousands of dollars, and being promised the legendary power and durability of a GM V8, only to find out later that what's under your hood might not be what you think it is. For decades, GM has built its reputation around these engines icons like the 5.3 liters and 6-point to LV8S that are supposed to deliver raw muscle, towing confidence, and long-term reliability. But now, a scandal is breaking wide open and owners are furious. Reports are surfacing that these engines may have hidden weaknesses, questionable design choices, and even deliberate cost-cutting that GM never wanted customers to know about. What makes this so explosive is how deep it goes. We're talking about engines in vehicles like the Chevrolet Silverado, GMC Sierra, Tahoe, Yukon, Suburban, and even performance cars that enthusiasts buy specifically for the V8. At the center of this storm is GM's infamous active fuel management and dynamic fuel management system stack that was supposed to save fuel by shutting off cylinders when not needed. On paper, it sounded like genius. In reality, it's turning into a nightmare. Owners are reporting excessive oil consumption, lifter failures, ticking noises, loss of power, and catastrophic engine damage, all tied back to these controversial systems. And here's the kicker. Some insiders are claiming GM knew these problems existed long before the public did. Lawsuits have already been filed, accusing the automaker of knowingly selling engines that were prone to failure, all while marketing them as bulletproof, tried and true V8 South. Imagine the betrayal. Loyal customers who've trusted GM for generations now face repair bills running into the thousands, sometimes exceeding the value of their vehicles. Dealerships are overwhelmed with frustrated owners, many of whom are being told repairs aren't covered, or worse, that nothing is wrong at all. But the scandal doesn't stop there. This isn't just about broken engines, it's about trust, image, and the future of GM's entire brand. Because let's be honest, when people buy a Ford or a Ram, they're chasing reliability and muscle too. If GM's legendary V8 crown slips even slightly, it's more than a mechanical issue, it's a full-blown identity crisis. And now whispers are starting to spread that GM may have cut corners in the rush to meet emissions regulations and fuel economy targets, choosing to gamble with long-term durability just to stay competitive on paper. If that's true, it means the very heart of what makes GM vehicles special, their engines, was compromised for corporate survival. And here's where things get even more suspicious. Some former GM engineers have reportedly admitted off the record that the lifter and oil issues were known risks that management chose to overlook. Think about that, a decision made in boardrooms that left thousands of everyday drivers stuck on the side of the road with blown motors. Behind the scenes, whispers of a cover-up are becoming louder, and they paint a disturbing picture of how far GM allegedly went to bury these engine problems. Former employees and insiders have hinted that the company wasn't blindsided by these failures at all. In fact, they suggest GM engineers flagged these weaknesses during development and early testing. According to these accounts, technical reports highlighted the risks of lifter collapse, oil starvation, and premature were linked to active fuel management and dynamic fuel management systems. But instead of halting production or redesigning the engines, management allegedly pushed forward, prioritizing fuel economy claims. Even more shocking, service bulletins to dealerships tell a story of calculated silence instead of acknowledging systemic defects. GM reportedly issued vague troubleshooting guides that downplayed the severity of the failures. Owners bringing in vehicles with lifter noise or ticking engines were often told it was normal operation or simply advised to use more frequent oil changes. Mechanics have spoken out, claiming that they were instructed not to escalate certain issues unless catastrophic damage had already occurred. Imagine being a loyal GM owner, told everything is fine while your engine is slowly tearing itself apart. And then there's the software angle. Some insiders allege that updates were quietly pushed to recalibrate engine management systems, not to fix the root problem, but to mask the symptoms. This means drivers might notice issues less often, but the underlying mechanical flaws remain. It's a tactic that keeps warranty claims down while keeping customers in the dark. If true, that's not just poor business practice, that's deception on a massive scale. What makes this even worse is how GM allegedly handled the mounting complaints. Lawsuit documents claimed that GM's internal data showed rising failure rates years before the public outcry, yet executives allegedly fought to limit recalls and shield themselves from liability. It's the classic corporate playbook: deny, delay, and deflect while thousands of owners foot the repair bills for engines that should have lasted decades. And here's the chilling question. If GM was willing to quietly sweep these engine flaws under the rug, what else might they be hiding? Could this be just one chapter in a bigger story of systemic problems buried to protect profits and image? One of the most shocking parts of this alleged cover-up is just how carefully orchestrated it seems. Insiders claim that GM didn't just brush off early warning signs, they actively created strategies to keep these flaws out of the spotlight. Internal emails, according to court filings, reportedly show heated debates between engineers who wanted to redesign the lifter system and executives who insisted the engines were market-ready. Those engineers were overruled, and the engines rolled out anyway. Then came the language control. Service bulletins were carefully worded, as dealerships couldn't use terms like defect or failure. Instead, problems were reframed as characteristics of the engine. A customer hearing that phrase wouldn't suspect anything serious. They'd leave thinking their vehicle was fine, even though a costly failure could be right around the corner. Dealership technicians were quietly trained to avoid raising alarm bells and to recommend temporary fixes like updated lifters, software flashes, or oil additives rather than full engine replacements. Even warranty data became a weapon in the cover-up. According to insiders, GM's legal and financial teams worked hand in hand to recode certain repair claims under less alarming categories. A collapsed lifter, it might be filed as a misfire condition. Excessive oil consumption? It could be logged as a customer maintenance concern. By reframing how failures were recorded, GM allegedly kept internal numbers looking less catastrophic than they really were, making it harder for regulators or the public to see the scope of the problem. And perhaps the most unsettling allegation is that GM knew full well these engines could not achieve the legendary longevity that built the brand's reputation. Reports suggest that internally, the acceptable failure rate was quietly raised, meaning that as long as a certain percentage of engines survived past the warranty window, the problem was considered contained. Think about that, a business model built around gambling that enough engines would last just long enough for customers to be stuck footing the bill once things went wrong. This is why so many owners feel betrayed. They didn't just buy a truck or SUV, they bought into decades of marketing that promised professional-grade strength and dependability. To now learn that their loyalty might have been repaid with half-truths and calculated silences, what has them furious? And with lawsuits digging deeper, more documents and testimonies are surfacing that could expose just how high this cover-up went. ChatGPT said, "It gets darker the deeper you look into these alleged cover-ups." Insiders say GM wasn't just passively ignoring problems, they were actively crafting ways to manage perception while keeping customers and even some regulators in the dark. One former engineer claims that during internal reviews, concerns about lifter collapse and oil starvation were categorized as known customer irritants rather than critical defects. That subtle reclassification meant the issues didn't trigger mandatory recalls or investigations. They were treated more like squeaky brakes than catastrophic engine failures. But the real bombshell lies in how GM allegedly managed information flow. Multiple whistleblowers suggest that the company created what they called containment strategies. Instead of acknowledging the failures outright, GM instructed service managers to perform temporary band-aid fixes like replacing only one failed lifter instead of the whole set, or flashing the ECU to smooth out rough-running engines, knowing full well the same failure would likely return later. The goal wasn't to fix the engines for good, but to push them past the warranty period, where the financial burden would fall squarely on the customer. And then there's the allegation of technical silencing. Engineers who raised alarms reportedly faced pressure to tone down their reports or risk being sidelined. Some accounts suggest that meetings discussing these failures often ended with executives warning staff to be mindful of the language in written documents because anything too explicit could later be used against GM in court. That's not quality control, that's damage control at the expense of customers. Even the way GM communicated with dealerships raises eyebrows. Insiders claim that bulletins were designed to normalize symptoms, so a ticking lifter or oil consumption wasn't a red flag, but something a technician could reassure an owner was within design parameters. In other words, making customers doubt their own concerns while the problem quietly grew worse under the hood. And perhaps the most damning claim? That GM allegedly ran internal testing showing failure Rates far above industry norms, but instead of halting production, they calculated the cost of potential lawsuits versus a recall. If the lawsuits came in lower than the recall cost, the engines would stay on the market. That cold, financial math is what some insiders say guided GM's decisions. This paints a picture not just of mechanical failure, but of corporate culture one, where protecting quarterly profits outweighed protecting the trust of loyal owners. And now, as more whistleblowers speak out, we're finally seeing the cracks in the wall GM tried so hard to build around these engines. And now the storm that GM tried to keep behind closed doors is spilling out into the public, and it's not slowing down. Furious owners, tired of paying thousands for repairs they believe should have never been their responsibility, are uniting in ways the company never expected. Across Facebook groups, Reddit threads, and dedicated forums, thousands of GM owners are sharing eerily similar stories. Ticking noises that turned into blown engines, lifters that collapsed with less than 60,000 miles, oil disappearing between changes, and dealerships refusing to acknowledge the root cause. These aren't isolated complaints anymore, they're forming a chorus of outrage. Social media has become the battleground. Videos of failed engines are going viral on TikTok and YouTube, with mechanics tearing down Silverado and Sierra Motors. To show the carnage inside, owners post receipts of $8,000, $12,000 repair bills, calling out GM directly and tagging executives. Hashtags like hashtag GM lifter failure and hashtag GM broken VAS are gaining traction, drawing in more frustrated voices daily. It's no longer just a mechanical issue, it's become a reputational wildfire, and GM's attempts to keep it quiet are backfiring spectacularly. On the legal front, class action lawsuits are stacking up. Plaintiffs accuse GM of knowingly selling defective engines while disguising the problems with carefully worded warranties and service bulletins. In court filings, some lawyers are even pushing for punitive damages, arguing that GM's cover-up was deliberate and reckless. The more evidence surfaces from insider testimony to warranty data, the stronger these cases become. If even a fraction of these lawsuits succeed, GM could be staring at billions in payouts, not just in settlements, but in forced recalls that could shake its entire business model. And what's really driving the fury is betrayal. GM owners aren't just angry about the money, they're angry about the trust they placed in a brand they thought would stand behind its products. Many of these people grew up in GM households, driving Chevys and GMCs for generations. Now, some are vowing never to buy GM again, switching to Ford, Ram, or even Toyota. It's a loyalty crisis that money can't easily fix, and every new viral post or lawsuit makes it harder for GM to patch things up. The question now is, will GM finally be forced to admit the truth under the pressure of public outrage and courtroom battles, or will they double down, risking their reputation as America's V8 powerhouse? What's happening right now feels less like a wave of angry customers and more like a full-blown movement. Owners who once proudly defended GM are now turning into its most vocal critics, and they're not staying quiet. Across Facebook groups, with tens of thousands of members, Silverado, Sierra, Tahoe, and Yukon drivers are banding together, sharing repair invoices, engine teardown photos, and even step-by-step guides on how to document issues for potential legal action. It's no longer a few people shouting into the void. This is organized, coordinated outrage. Reddit threads are filled with heartbreaking stories. Families who saved for years to buy their dream truck, only to watch the engine fail before 80,000 miles. Veterans who trusted GM's reputation for toughness, left stranded on the side of the road with lifter collapse. Small business owners who depended on their trucks to make a living, now stuck with massive repair bills they can't afford. These stories aren't just venting, they're fueling lawsuits. Every viral post is evidence. Every shared experience a potential plaintiff for the growing list of class action cases. And here's where things really shift. Law firms are paying attention. Ads are popping up across social media calling on GM owners to join lawsuits, promising to fight for compensation. Videos of mechanics exposing lifter failures are being used in legal campaigns, turning technical breakdowns into ammunition against GM in court. Already, several lawsuits accuse the automaker of systematic deception, alleging that GM knew these engines would fail yet continued to market them as long-lasting, dependable, and professional grade. If even one of these cases reaches trial and succeeds, it could set off a chain reaction of copycat lawsuits nationwide. Meanwhile, social media pressure is hitting GM's brand image in real time. Hashtags like hashtag GM lifter failure and hashtag broken V8 are circulating, while YouTube creators and TikTok influencers rack up millions of views exposing the issue. GM's carefully crafted marketing about professional-grade reliability is being dismantled in the public square, one viral video at a time. This is where the anger becomes dangerous for GM because once public perception turns, it doesn't matter how many new models or EVs they roll out. If buyers no longer trust the badge, the damage is lasting, and this might just be the beginning. Owners are now calling for government regulators to step in, demanding investigations and potential recalls. If agencies like the NHTSA decide to act, GM won't just be facing angry customers, they'll be facing federal scrutiny. And while GM scrambles to contain the fallout, its biggest rivals are circling like sharks in the water. Ford, Ram, and Toyota see this scandal not as a crisis, but as an opportunity to win over thousands of frustrated GM loyalists who suddenly feel betrayed. These brands know that once trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to repair, and they're moving fast to position themselves as the safe hands for buyers fleeing GM showrooms. Ford, for example, is leaning heavily into the legacy of its 5.0L Coyote V8, marketing it as a proven, durable workhorse with none of the lifter or oil consumption nightmares haunting GM. Dealers are even pointing frustrated Silverado and Sierra owners toward the F-150, boasting about reliability studies and highlighting Ford's willingness to invest in both V8 and hybrid technologies without sacrificing toughness. And as social media posts of broken GM engines continue to spread, Ford fans are flooding comment sections, using the scandal as ammo to sway undecided buyers. Ram, too, isn't missing its chance. With Stellantis slowly phasing out its Hemi V8 South in favor of the new Hurricane twin-turbo 6, Ram dealerships are pitching their engines as the future promising power and efficiency without the mechanical baggage that now hangs over GM's V8 South. Salespeople know many GM owners are nervous about trying something new, but with lawsuits piling up, Ram is betting those same owners would rather take a chance on a modern engine than risk another lifter failure from GM. And then there's Toyota, the brand that's built its reputation on bulletproof reliability. With the Tundra and Sequoia now running the iForce Max hybrid twin-turbo V6, Toyota is positioning itself as the alternative for buyers sick of costly breakdowns. Their messaging is subtle but effective. Why gamble on a V8 that might leave you stranded when you can buy Toyota reliability instead? For disillusioned GM families, that pitch is powerful. Competitors are also quietly targeting GM owners with aggressive trade-in offers. Ford and Ram dealers are advertising above-market values for used Silverados and Sierras, knowing frustrated drivers are ready to jump ship. Toyota dealers are sweetening the deal with extended warranties and low financing rates, essentially saying, let GM's problem be our opportunity. And it's working. Early market data shows GM losing share in regions where its V8 trucks once dominated. If this trend continues, GM could be facing something far worse than lawsuits, a permanent erosion of customer loyalty. Once buyers switch brands and have a good experience, they rarely come back. And that's exactly what Ford, Ram, and Toyota are banking on. If this loyalty shift accelerates, GM's financial outlook could spiral into a nightmare scenario. Trucks and SUVs powered by V8 engines aren't just another product line for GM there. The company's profit backbone, the Silverado, Sierra, Tahoe, Yukon, and Suburban generate billions annually, often carrying higher margins than compact cars or EVs. If even a fraction of loyal buyers defect to Ford, Ram, or Toyota, GM's balance sheets could start bleeding faster than most analysts are prepared for. Wall Street already knows this. Investors pay close attention to truck sales because they're the lifeblood of Detroit automakers. If Silverado and Sierra sales drop significantly, GM's stock could tumble, wiping billions off its market value. Add in the looming threat of multi-billion-dollar class action settlements, potential recalls, and warranty expansions, and suddenly GM could be facing the perfect financial storm. Every angry customer who switches brands isn't just a lost sale, it's a ripple effect that hurts dealership revenue, part sales, and long-term brand equity. Let's break it down further. If lawsuits force GM to recall even a fraction of the affected V8 engines, costs could run into the billions. A lifter replacement isn't cheap, and if regulators force a large-scale recall, the per-vehicle cost could cripple GM's margins for years. Combine that with declining sales, and GM may have no choice but to cut production, idle factories, or slash future investments. That's money that was supposed to fund GM's electric future, but instead would be swallowed by damage control. And here's where the danger multiplies. Competitors won't just take GM's lost customers, they'll lock them in for the next decade. Truck buyers are famously loyal, and once they jump ship to Ford or Toyota, they're often gone for good. That means GM isn't just losing sales today, they're losing entire generations of future customers. This scandal is already raising red flags among financial analysts. Some are quietly warning that GM's dependence on its V8 trucks makes it uniquely vulnerable. Ford can lean on hybrid and EV momentum, Toyota on its reliability halo, Ram on its bold new powertrains, but GM? If the V8 brand collapses, what's left to hold their traditional buyers? EVs like the Silverado, even the GMC Hummer, aren't ready to pick up the slack, and skeptics argue they never will in the same way the old V8 South did. And that's the terrifying reality. GM's entire financial stability could hinge on whether it can contain this scandal or whether this wave of lawsuits and customer defections becomes the beginning of a long, painful collapse. Here's the brutal truth: if this loyalty shift keeps accelerating, GM's financial foundation could crumble faster than anyone expects. For decades, GM's V8-powered trucks and SUVs haven't just been vehicles, they've been money-printing machines. The Silverado and Sierra alone account for nearly half of GM's North American profits, with SUVs like the Tahoe, Yukon, and Suburban filling in the rest. These models command premium prices, sell in massive volumes, and generate margins that smaller cars and EVs simply can't match. But if trust continues to erode, that profit pipeline could dry up. Even a 10% drop in Silverado and Sierra sales would mean billions lost in annual revenue. If buyers defect en masse to Ford's F-150, Ram's 1500, or Toyota's Tundra, the losses could multiply. It wouldn't just be GM's truck division that suffers. That cash is what funds future vehicle development, EV research, global expansion, and shareholder dividends. Without it, GM's entire long-term strategy is at risk. The lawsuits only add gasoline to the fire. Each new class action case not only threatens payouts in the hundreds of millions, but also tarnishes GM's brand further, scaring away new buyers.